Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Heidi Blackie, and I help women create the confidence to change their lives. I'm really excited about my guest today. Her name's Katy Dahl, and a mutual friend put us in touch. And I can't wait for you to hear what she has to say. She has a podcast called Hi, I'm Anxious. And Katy, welcome. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your podcast?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me, Heidi. So I am, like you said, Katy Dahl. I am in my 40s. I'm married with little children. I'm a career mama, and I also have a couple of different businesses. One includes a community of women who struggle with anxiety and are high achievers, and so hence the Hi, I'm Anxious podcast. And um, it's just a place for people like us to go to get together to feel you're not alone and be in community with others so that we can support each other.
Thank you. So today I just did an anxiety series on my YouTube channel, and I wanted to invite you to come today so that we could just have a conversation about anxiety and your area of expertise, kind of the high achiever anxiety, and share your experience, your journey, kind of what inspired you to start your podcast, and then any strategies that would be helpful for viewers. So, what's your kind of your personal journey with anxiety, and kind of what inspired you or prompted you to start your Hi, I'm Anxious podcast?
So in about 2018, I was officially diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And really, all it was just kind of like an aha moment for me. Well, of course, like
Hmm.
this shouldn't be a surprise to you because you've struggled with it for so long. I think it's just anxiety has been kind of my operating level or norm for so long, sometimes worse, sometimes not as bad. And also, interestingly, along the journey, I'm perimenopausal age and I struggle with some thyroid issues and all of these stages of life and issues, like health issues, like thyroid issues, can cause anxiety problems. And so it's just been really fascinating to learn more about the causes of anxiety, anxiety specific impact on me, and also pair that with, I think, my tendency toward being a high achiever. And so, really, this has the group and the podcast has been all about sharing my learnings on the journey because I think that it can feel so lonely at times, and you start to wonder, am I the only one? And how do I get through this? And so I hope that what it brings is a sense of you're not alone to people who might be struggling through it. And I think that as high achievers, you tend to sometimes struggle alone because you're so capable, you can do so much for yourself, and you're used to being able to deal with really difficult things that you feel like you should be able to do it alone for nearly everything in your life. And that's just, it's not necessary and it's not helpful. So that's why I formed the community. I wanted to just bring like minded women together so that we could learn from and support each other.
I love that. And a couple things there. One, I also have thyroid issues and am perimenopausal, and I never realized that thyroid can also kind of go along with anxiety, or anxiety can go along with thyroid. And I know it's a huge problem for women um, having thyroid issues as well. So, how do you know, what are the signs of being a high achiever? What are for people out there who aren't sure? Because I mean, when I talked to you before, when before we met last, I was thinking like, am I a high achiever? And I don't know. And then, I thought, okay, I have a smart dog. So instead of, I exhausted all the dog training classes in our area and online. And then I became like a professional dog trainer so that I could stay one step ahead of her. And I was like, maybe that is a little bit of a sign of high
I would say
achiever,
so.
or instead of just, oh, okay, the dog, whatever. So can you explain a little bit more about that and how kind of how high achieving shows up for you in your life and maybe even in your community?
Yeah, so I've noticed this tendency to be, I mean, just very achievement driven for especially women. I think that you can get into the habit of um, sort of outward achievements that can sidetrack you from maybe paying attention to the things that you should be paying attention to in your life, like the signals your body is sending you, like, hey, I'm anxious here, there's something going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that if you are questioning if you're a high achiever, you probably are. It's so funny how many people reach out and say, "Oh, I didn't realize I was a high achiever until I listened to your podcast." I'm like, right? Because you're just too busy doing the work. You're not sitting there thinking of yourself like, look at me and look how much I'm doing. You're probably actually judging yourself. I could do
Mm-hmm.
more, I could do better. And so I think there's also an element of that, like pushing yourself way past the point that a typical person may push themselves or then might even be expected of you, whether it's in a work relationship, a personal relationship, just that going above and beyond constantly is those are all things I see among people who I would classify as high achievers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting you say it's an outward achievement where underneath it maybe feeling not as much achievement or trying to stay kind of with your head above water. Is that kind of one of the things you think might be the case?
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting too because so I know we've talked, you're an athlete. You have this ability to push your body beyond what might be healthy, like beyond typical. You know, when you work out, you're going to feel some pain. That might mean some growth for you. But if you are achievement oriented, maybe you're someone who drives yourself past the point of what might be typical discomfort into something that is unhealthy. And so I think that a lot of the evidence of the high achieving can be exterior, especially when you aren't somebody who's maybe going to show any weaknesses that you have by saying, oh gosh, I'm just really tired. Instead, oh gosh, I haven't gotten enough done this week. And so I have more I need to do. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to get things done. So I just see a lot of external evidence of this high achieving type behavior that tends to come at the cost of the internal, like maybe even body systems or mentality for the most part, mindset.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think too, that can give the presentation to other people that we can do it all. I
Mhm.
think it fuels this expectation of other people. Look at all you're doing and you're doing great. And underneath it's like you have no idea how exhausted I am and how depleted and I know I'm writing checks I can't cash, but I don't know how to ask for help maybe or where to what to take off the list or how to pare down or how to take care of myself because I've been so used to pushing so hard for so long that I don't even know what it means to prioritize myself. Do you find that in your community of people that have the high achieving anxiety?
Yeah, especially women,
Yeah,
which is what my community
that's kind of
focuses
what
on.
I'm
I think
talking
there's a
about.
lot of social, right? Social norms that are just ingrained in us from the womb, where there's an expectation, especially women now. You work outside the home, you raise children, you're supposed
Mhm.
to look pleasant and have a life of your own, a social life, be exercising at the gym. And so you might be trying to do all of these things to your own detriment potentially, and maybe it looks okay from the outside. Well, look at her. She gets up, she gets dressed, she goes to work,
Yeah,
she comes home, she feeds kids, she goes to bed, makes it to the gym, and she sometimes goes out with her friends. I mean, she's got it all going on, but inside maybe she's not not
yeah.
holding it together so well.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can have this presentation that can be so different from kind of what lies beneath it. So how does anxiety show up for you and what does it look like?
Yeah, I think it just depends on kind of the scenario or the situation. Oftentimes, I find that it results in more of that achievement type orientation. Well, okay, I've got to find a way to make logic of this. I'm going to use my mind and the tools that I've developed in order to get through it. So I'm going to overthink something. I'm going to study up on something. I'm going to lose sleep getting it done. I'm going to find a way to get through it, even though maybe all it is piling on me or engaging in behaviors that are just unhelpful or flat out unhealthy. And if I stop, I will notice the sensations in my body, but as a high achiever, you probably rarely get still and present enough to be able to notice it. Instead, you're going, always taking care of somebody else, something outside of you. So I think it's hard to see sometimes the external evidence of those symptoms that are coming up for you, but really inside, you realize like 3 people will be talking to me at once, and my poor brain is going haywire, and I can't listen to a thing one of them is saying, and then I'm hollering, "Stop, just stop," or, not sleeping at night, can't go to sleep or go to sleep and wake up, and then that's it, like, your brain is off to the races, "Oh, I have all these things I need to do, and let me start worrying about all the things I can't control." So I think it just depends, but it
Mhm.
tends to be mental for me, like, with the overthinking or trying to make logic of things and find a mental way to get through whatever I feel like is causing me the anxiety.
So for your mental kind of symptoms, having a mental strategy or kind of antidote is what you practice to kind of get rid of that?
That is what I have tended toward, but what I find is more helpful are things that are more body based, right? Like all of
Mhm.
um the things you should do, right? Like get a good night's sleep, eat
Mhm.
well, drink water, don't drink too much caffeine, avoid alcohol, spend time in community with people who you are nourished by, take
Mhm.
breaks, rest. So, all these things that are good for your body, but mentally you're blocking them out because you're just going to find a way through it. I'm just going to keep hammering away with this hammer that I have, even though it's not really helping me. Sometimes it's worked in the past, but I find that, yeah, that is something that's common. I think with
Mhm.
people who struggle with anxiety that are high achievers is you lean on logic and thinking things through rather than paying attention to what's happening in your body and caring for your body itself.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's interesting because I was just talking to a friend and she wants me to come talk to some of her friends about anxiety. And I was talking about some of the ways that it shows up and kind of asking them how it shows up. And she said, I don't even think they would know how it shows up. I don't, because I immediately go to the physical effects of it. Like I feel it in my stomach. And so I definitely kind of get in my head over all the things that you said. I've got all check, 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 all those too. But for me, it's so strong of a feeling in my body that it's hard to ignore. And I find diving into kind of the mental stimulation as almost at times a relief from it. So it's kind of a little bit different in presentation and response than yours. So it can be so different for for each person. And it definitely, I think, too, depends on the situation as well. But just being aware of it in your body is, most of us are from the neck up. And so we're so distant from our bodies for whatever reason. And after being in therapy for 2000 or 20 years with, thousands of people, it's amazing how much we are so in our heads and we dissociate from our bodies or just feel so disconnected. And it's kind of that looking at it as there is no separation. We, with the medical view, we're so reductionist with, it's the mind and the body and emotions, and they're all separate, but you know, they're all there overlapping. But it's just what kind of cues you, oh, okay, this actually is anxiety and the way it's presenting for me right now. So it can be really helpful to kind of know what that is for you individually.
Recognizing where you feel it in your body. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's and I use a lot of the cognitive strategies to get to kind of, I use breathing and then cognitive strategies to really dial it down in my body, because it's like a fist that is so tight in my stomach that just feels like you can't get it open. And it'll be the, I'll wake up in the morning with it. It'll just be this dread of, whatever it is. You pick what it is today, and for the most part, it's much less frequent, but it depends on what's going on in life, and life is always dealing us different things to learn and grow and change and learn about ourselves. So you think you have it solved, and then it's wait a minute, here's another challenge. Let me see how you do with this one. So I think it's good to know yourself
Hmm.
is tremendous. So let's see. One of the things that you have in the description for your Hi, I'm Anxious podcast is you went from Hi, I'm Anxious to Hi, I'm way less anxious. Can you tell me a little bit about that transformation for you and kind of what that looks like? I mean, we've just discussed some of the things that you do, the day-to-day things in your body. Do you feel like you started the podcast, and then as you've kind of grown, have you grown with the podcast and transformed almost as part of transforming you, in terms of, does that make sense? I feel like I'm not making sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think um it's interesting because one day it dawned on me that my own personal growth journey has really been a lot like kind of a set of stairs. I'll make the leap up to the next stair and think, wow, thank goodness I passed that last one. But then what's ahead of me is that stair to make it through, and then the next level to go up. And I never know what it's going to be. I think that, especially over the last few years, becoming a mother and going through the journey of being a mother has really been a catalyst for my own personal growth. I don't want my kids in however many years from now to be sitting on a therapist's couch and talking about what a mess they are from anxiety and that they got it from their mom. I want to
Mhm.
be that calming, soothing, steady, stable figure in their life that teaches them how to handle things well rather than becoming kind of a ball of anxiety. And so I think that there's just so much about motherhood that has just really given me opportunity for growth. I mean, you have to push yourself through some really hard times. I have kids that don't like to sleep real well. And when we're not sleeping good, we know that everything is harder. And
Mhm.
um, I think also the tough thing about anxiety is a lot of it is future focused, worrying about what's going to happen in the future. And being a mom certainly gives you opportunity for that. So my growth journey has not been necessarily a consistent line upward, but just this constant stair step of getting to the like new level, new devil. But I can definitely see looking back how there are things that I can handle now or things that I have overcome. And I just am astonished that I'm able to do it. Like I remember in college, I put off speech class, which was part of the curriculum I had to go through to get my degree until I had to do it because I was horrified to speak in front of people. And now I have a podcast and I can stand up in front of a group of people. And it's not that I'm not nervous, but I can do it without overthinking it to the point of making myself sick or not sleeping the night before. So I think that it's just life has presented me with opportunity after opportunity, usually in the form of challenges to constantly um, increase that upward stair step trajectory or growth and give me opportunities to test out the tools that I'm learning and the things that are working well and build tighter connections with myself and others so that I can help the journey be easier for myself and then hopefully others. And that's really why I'm doing the podcast and I have a community is I want to share what I'm learning so maybe other people's journeys can be made easier too, and maybe I can save them some of the heartache that I had myself by them learning from me rather than not knowing about something or trying something and failing and finding out the hard way. Maybe I can pass that on to them and then also encourage them in the journey too, because like we talked about, it can be just such a lonely and tough feeling, especially when there's no one way through it. There's no one way out of it. You just have to do what's best for you in the moment.
Hmm. Gosh, so many parts of that, Katie. I, I, I love your mission to do this for the kids, for your kids, to really want them to grow up with knowing stable and steady and kind of making it's bigger than you
Yeah.
and taking the steps to grow to meet that challenge for your kids and set that example. And I think I wonder too if knowing it in yourself, you're going to be able to see that in them if they start to kind of have those tendencies. And I don't have kids, but I've noticed from my friends, a lot of them have kids that are really anxious and are in therapy, are on medications, and it's really hard. And I don't know what it says about our society or kids these days, or I feel like it's a lot harder time to be a kid than when I was a kid. I don't remember any fights in schools, let alone shootings, and just the safety aspect and the social media and all of those things. And so being a parent, that adds another layer. It's not just all the high achieving, getting everything done. It's that extra piece that you now have people in your life that you're raising into amazing human beings. And there's all that additional, pressure on you for that. And I also really like that kind of growth that you've had over the course of doing the podcast. And I think it's so great because there are so many people out there and who you're really vocal about it. And I know for myself, I've always been I'll kind of ashamed, like I'm tough, I'm tougher than that. I'm not anxious, and I've had in my head what anxiety looks like, and I've known people who are like really anxious to the point where it's limiting them, but it's also limited me in my life. And to have a person like you who is so vulnerable and so real to be out there talking about it and being sharing your journey and sharing what you're going through and how you're growing and how you're dealing with it is just super inspiring. And being a leader and definitely with all the mental health issues and the isolation and feeling alone, because again, on the surface we look great and underneath we don't. And it's also so easy to compare with other people who look like, what we were talking about before we started recording. These people who look like they've got it all, it's all polished, it's clean, and kind of what, that could be a bar that we hold ourselves to, but we don't know anything about them. And to take that as, oh, if I'm falling short of that, then I'm not enough, or I'm not adequate, or I have this anxiety that I'm not going to be good enough. So I love that journey and transformation. So, um, what are, can you share a time when anxiety kind of threatened to steal joy from a moment or an experience where you were really kind of struggling to stay in a moment, or experience a really heightened sense of joy?
Yeah, every day, every day, that darned anxiety. Um, yeah, it's interesting. So I had a sibling who passed away last year. He had terminal cancer, and I think of the moments, it was a relatively quick and terrible battle that he fought with it. And I
Mm,
remember moments being with him, and he was always a pretty loving person, but he was very vocal in the end, like, I love you, and trying to spend as much time with people as he could. And I remember worrying about, how do I respond to that? And how do I explain this to my little kids? And how do I, and getting in my head about my response to it in the moment, I recognized so many times was just taking my time away from the time I had left with him. And
mm,
so, um, I don't have the right answer for how to handle that, but I just recognizing that, I was able to catch myself. Like, here you are in your head worrying about what you say to him in response to what he just told you. Just be here. And it doesn't really matter what you say or don't say, but he can tell that you're here or not here.
mm-hmm,
And I think just being able to catch yourself when you're in those moments
mm-hmm,
where you're feeling anything but calm, or in the very familiar, icky throes of anxiety and fear and worry and dread and all the things that come with it, can be just so important. What's that saying? Like, recognition is the first step to change. So, in those moments where I have had anxiety pop up daily and threaten to steal anything good from me, um, just being able to see it, I think, takes it down, takes the threat of it down a notch a little bit, and then
mm-hmm,
maybe gives me a little bit of time to react and maybe choose my reaction rather than default to the anxiety, which tends to be a problem, especially for people with an anxiety disorder. Those neural pathways are well grooved into that brain of yours, and you like to travel down the, oh, let's start thinking about the worst case scenario
mm-hmm,
type thing. But when you can see that that's what you're doing, then the door of possibility opens to something else besides that.
mm-hmm. I love that, the door of possibility. I'm very sorry about your brother. I think that sounds really hard, and the emotions and everything that in that moment too. It's just, I mean, I've been there with my mom with cancer, and it's just, there's so much. It's kind of like I feel flooded, where what am I thinking and feeling and wanting to be here, but I'm also just a million other places too, to go through that. Um, I like that whole recognition of the moment, being aware of the anxiety that's kind of creeping in, and kind of choosing that, trying to choose the path of possibility instead of the well-worn path. And I just started doing a practice last week that is a really interesting image. When I feel the anxiety coming and just overpowering me, I imagine I'm just this like 10 times bigger, and I'm standing there in front of this little kind of pile of dirt that is anxiety. I've made it, you can make it a shape or whatever it is you want. But I have this line in between us, and the anxiety is just this small little pile. And I just am like, no, you cannot step over the line. I am so much bigger than you, and I'm so much more expansive, and I'm not going to let you have power over me. And I have to say that that image of this little thing, and I make it small and I make it just weak and falling apart, and I make me bigger. It's an interesting way to kind of get out of the head and into this image that really helped me change my perspective in that moment, and take back my power from the anxiety kind of winning, I guess, in that moment. And it's just another thing to put in the toolkit, but it's I heard it on a book that I was reading or listening to, I guess I should say. And it was just very interesting way to, and it wasn't necessarily anxiety. It was whatever has power over you in this moment. So it can be a person, it can be a thing, it can be, an event. But putting it in its place really takes the power out of it, and puts it in me. So
I love that. I love that the combination of the visualization, very powerful and concrete, right? And that it's
yeah,
outside of you. Because I think
yeah,
anxiety makes you turn inward a lot,
yeah.
but you put it outside of you. I have to try that now.
Try
I
it
love
out.
it.
Make your own little, I was thinking like, oh, a little piece of slime or a little piece of,
Mhm.
and it's a different thing, but it's just this little like having it be so weak, because it feels at times like its power is so strong that it can overpower me and
Mhm.
my ability to stay calm and present and confident in this moment. And so by kind of changing roles, it really undermines the power of that anxiety. And it's just a really great visualization. And I'll even say like, no, just stop it. No, you're not stepping over the line. Like just kind of getting into character almost. So try it
That's
out.
incredible. I will. I'll have to try it. It's a nice combination of some similar techniques that I've heard of. And
Uh-huh.
I especially love visualizing it as like this little nothing and you're bigger than it. No,
Yeah.
not today.
Yeah, yeah. Like put you in your place. I've even like put it in a little box up on the shelf. Not today. You're back there.
Love that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was funny. My husband, we were at the farmer's market yesterday, and he always gets pastries, and I'm dairy-free, gluten-free, so I never do. And I'm not a big sweet tooth. And we were walking by, and I said, "Are you going to stop and get your pastry?" And he's like, "No." This little voice on my shoulder is like, "No pastry for you. No."
Not
So we
today.
all have our demons.
Oh,
But you've shared so much. Is there any other strategies or anything else that you want to share with listeners?
yeah, I think I would just leave people with, don't let it define you. Um,
Hmm.
I had my diagnosis and for a while I got really into it. And sometimes I even have to remind myself, like, this doesn't define you. You might struggle with it, but you're not anxiety. It's not a permanent part of you. You don't have to struggle with it forever. And there are some things you can do to get through it. I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, it is so easy. I mean, on the one hand, it's so validating to get that diagnosis. Like,
Mhm.
yes, I actually do have something. but it's also really easy to fall into the trap of this is me. I am anxious. I have this and this is how I am and it's not changeable. So I think that's a really good point to bring up. And it can be so easy to feel like we are what the loudest thing is inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that there's other things there too is really important.
Agreed.
So, Katy, thank you so much. How can people find you?
Yeah, they can go anywhere where they listen to podcasts and listen to the Hi I'm Anxious podcast or come to hiimanxious.com and hang out there too. Thank you. Thank you for
Great.
this. I love
Thank
connecting with you, Heidi. You're a gem.
So are you, Katy. And I will link all of your contact information and the podcast in the description below. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you in the next video.